Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about the concept of nationalism, which keeps coming in news every now and then with respect to India as well as with respect to the other countries of the world as well. So we are going to discuss in detail about what is the history and when the nationalism basically has emerged as a concept or as a term as far as the political philosophies is concerned. We are also going to discuss about what has been the significance of nationalism in our earlier history as well as in our contemporary times, and what are the concerns associated with the feeling and emergence of nationalism in different countries, different nations of the world. At the same time, we are also going to discuss briefly that what is the major differences between the concept of nationalism and the concept of patriotism. So let us try to understand this first of all in brief detail. So to give you a brief introduction about nationalism, in simple terms, we can define nationalism as an ideology, to be more precise, the political ideology that is expressed by people who fervently believe that their nation is superior to all other nations. This feeling of superiority are based on different belief system, different values. For example, it can be on the basis of ethnicity, it can be on the basis of race, language, religion, culture, or even the social values or the way of life. So, from a purely political standpoint, what we can say that the main goal or main aim that nationalism tries to ensure or tries to defend is the country's popular sovereignty. Now, popular sovereignty again is a political term. It basically refers to it basically is made up of two terms. One is popular and other is sovereignty. So, sovereignty in simple terms we can understand refers to the right of any country, right of any state to govern itself, and the popular here refers that from where this right is being taken or from where the government is drawing its right to govern the nation. So government is basically taking its authority from the people of the country or from the citizens of the country. So popular sovereignty basically refers to a sovereign nation that is mainly governed as per the will and the wishes of its citizens, as per the will and wishes of its population. So the nationalism basically tries to defend the country's popular sovereignty, and thus by doing so, it also tries to protect a particular nation's interest from the political, social, and cultural pressures that might have been exerted or might have been posed in the modern global economy and the modern globalized world. So, in this sense, what we can say that nationalism, many times by the expert, is seen as antithesis of globalism. In the globalism, where we are trying to integrate all different countries and nations together, we try to have economic unification. We are trying to have, we can say, such agreements which is beneficial for all the countries. Nationalism basically focuses upon the self-interest of a particular country. So that is why it is considered as antithesis of globalization or globalism. Now let us try to understand that when nationalism as a concept has emerged in our history. So we can go back to 17th century or middle of 17th century. That is when the term of nationalism has basically originated. So in that respect, we can say that it is a relatively modern movement, and though it has emerged in the middle of the 17th century, it became widely recognized sentiment by only the end of 18th century, especially after the French Revolution and the American War of Independence. So these were the two major events that has happened in our history that has shaped the emergence of nationalism, and it is believed that it is these two events such as American and French revolutions were the first impactful expression of nationalism shown by the citizens of any particular nation state. So to understand nationalism, we can divide into two different phases. One phase is up to 20th century, and the next phase we can understand is the after 20th century. So if we talk about the during the 20th century up to 20th century, the major development has happened in the 17th century, especially in the England. It is during this time that England was emerging as a world leader in various fields such as science, commerce, trade, culture, as well as there was development of lot of political and social theories by different experts, by different philosophers. So due to these rapid changes, large scale changes, and also there was changes that is going on the religion of the England, where people are becoming more and more Catholic, people are becoming more and more influenced by the holy books such as Bible, and thus they were developing a kind of pride and confidence in their civilization, in their culture. So under the influence of religion, pride, and confidence, a large section of the English intelligentsia, and also the message was disseminated among the wider population of the England. They began to feel a kind of a mission, that it is a kind of God-given mission that has been given to them, so that they can usher in a new age of reformation and individual liberty throughout the world. Now pay special attention to this belief system. This is the belief system that in the later stages has paved the way for colonization of different countries across Asia, Africa by the English Empire as well as other European empire. This has been clearly mentioned by a well-noted political philosopher as well as the poet of England, John Milton, in his notable book Paradise Lost, where he has said that English people and the English intelligentsia political classes were making an effort to spread around the world, to spread across the world, what had by then become England's vision of liberty. That means the people of England were basically what we can say were becoming more and more ethnocentric in nature, where they used to believe that whatever culture, whatever way of living which they have, that is superior to all other citizens, to all other countries, and that is why it is their God-given duty that they should go and spread these values in other countries as well. And the one way how they can influence the other people or can spread these values in the other countries is through the method of colonization. So that is the whole idea behind this nationalism. Now, the next important development happened in the 18th century when the political philosophers such as Rousseau have given this concept of social contract theory, and under the influence of such political philosophers, it has influenced also the American as well as the French nationalism. To remind you, America was also kind of colony of England up to year 1776. So during this time, there is a growth of American nationalism where people basically were very much attached to the idea of a new nation as humanity's guiding light to liberty, equality, and happiness for the all. So this was the basic building ground of the American nation. And this was largely influenced by two major political philosophers of that time. One was Thomas Paine and other was the Thomas Jefferson. So under the guiding light of such philosophies, American finally waged a war against the English colonialists. In 1775, you have the American Revolution, and finally in year 1776, America got independence from the England and developed and made up their own nation based on such values. So the French Revolution that has happened in year 1789 drew heavily from the idea that has governed American nationalism or has led to development of America as an independent nation. And thus, in 1789, people rebelled against the existing monarchical system of government in France against Louis XVI, and thus they also formed a state which was based on the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which also have influenced the Constitution of India as well after the independence. Thus, these development that has happened between 17th century to the mid 18th and 19th century, finally as nationalism started or began to take its modern shape, there is also emergence of symbolism and rituals to identify an individual with a particular nation. This symbolism can be in the form of flag, the symbolism and rituals can be in the form of singing of national anthem, or it can be in form of some sort of symbol, some sort of geographical boundary. So these are the modern variant or modern inclusion to the idea of nationalism. Now, further, the next important development that happened during World War I, which was fought between 1914 to 1918, and later on World War II, which was fought between 1945 to 1941 to 1945. So it was during this time period we have emergence of very new forms of nationalism, which was not heard of before, or which was not, we can say, influenced people before, influenced nations before. For example, it was after the end of World War I when Germany was humiliated after signing the Treaty of Versailles. Taking advantage of this situation in Germany, Adolf Hitler came into power, and thus he was able to influence a large section of German society, German people, because he influenced people on the basis of nationalism. He tried to basically, what we can say, he tried to basically emulate a new brand of nationalism that is called as fanatical nationalism, which was based on the principles not of liberty, freedom, and equality as we have seen before, but on the principles of racial purity, where he believed that Aryan race is superior to all other races, and due to this racial superiority, the Aryan race has a sole right to basically rule over other nations and other races of the world. Authoritarian rule, and the mythical glories of Germany's pre-Christian past. So these were the major themes behind the nationalism of the Germany during World War II or before the World War II. Other kind of nationalism that were developing in the continents such as Asia and Africa, these were largely driven by the independence movement in the wake of decolonization that began. So as we can see, in different part of the world, in different nations of the world, the idea driving the feeling of nationalism, the concept and the values driving the feeling of nationalism were quite different and were quite shifting from 17th century till 20th century. So what basically has happened that during the end of World War War or after the end of World War War, we see a new form of nationalism that has triumphed in the Central and Eastern Europe. Because up till World War One, a large number of independent countries that we see in Europe today were part of a single monarchical structure or part of a single kingdom. For example, we have new nation states that basically freed themselves from the shackle of monarchical rule, from the shackle of authoritarian rule, and set up their own space, separate independent state such as Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Yugoslavia, and Romania. These countries basically has built themselves up from the remains of the empires such as Habsburg Empire of Austria-Hungary, Romanov dynasty of the Rus, and the Hohenzollern Russian empires. However, at the same time, in Asia, as we discussed, charismatic revolutionary leaders were coming up and they were also infusing a new brand of nationalism to drive the colonizers, to drive the imperial power away from their own nation, away from their own political geographical boundaries, such as Kemal Ataturk in Turkey, Mahatma Gandhi in India, and Sun Yat-sen in China. However, there is again a new shift happened after the end of World War II. After the end of World War II, what is happening is that we have establishment of multinational economic, military, and political organizations, as you know, such as United Nations in 1945, North Atlantic Treaty Organizations in 1949, as well as the World Bank International Monetary Fund in year 1945 as well. So due to the development of these institutions and large-scale cooperation that we see among different nations after defeat of Axis power by the Allied powers, we see a general reduction of the spirit of nationalism across Europe. Because to remind you, it was basically the spirit of nationalism that has pushed entire Europe into the we can say World War II. So because due to this reason, everyone in the Europe have understood and have seen the disastrous effect of the war. They were not very much willing again to infuse and again to govern themselves by the spirit of the extreme nationalism. However, despite these reduction of the spirit of nationalism across the European countries, as long as there was a Cold War that existed between the United States of America and Soviet Union, there was a continuous fight going on between two different ideologies, that is capitalism or democracy on one hand and the communism and dictatorship on the other hand. So until 1919, there has been some sort of nationalism that was prevalent among the European nations and it remained very much alive. Now let us try to understand that what has happened or what is happening in the modern world. So many experts obviously believe that at no time since World War One or World War Two has the power of nationalism been as evident as it is today. And this is something that is not specific, not something that is seen in very narrow area or some small regions of the world. This is something that you see in the developed countries, in the large countries of the world today. For example, especially since 2016, we see a significant increase in nationalist sentiment across the world. And to give you an example that how this nationalist sentiment had manifested itself, so the best example is the Brexit, where the United Kingdom, or we can say England, decided to separate its path away from the European Union. Largely, the idea that was behind this can be said to be driven by the idea of nationalism. Not only that, if we take some few other examples, we have the emergence of Donald Trump as the president of the United States of America in year 2016. So this was something that also was driven by his ideology of extreme nationalism. And here we have such concepts such as MAGA, that is Make America Great Again, and America First policy, where he ensured his voters that if he became president of the United States of America, he will make sure that American interests are protected and he will work solely for the interest of the country. So many voters were basically driven by such kind of nationalist idea and voted, and thus he became president. Not only that, even if you talk about Germany, in Germany we have a party called as AfD, which is known for its opposition to the general integration of Germany with the Europe or the larger world, as well as the immigration stance, which is they have a anti-immigration stance because they do not want people from other countries to come and take up their job and live there. This is also sort of nationalism that is prevalent in Germany, and AfD party in recent time has acquired the highest percentage of votes here in Germany. So we can say in some sort of one sort of way, the nationalism is also in rise in Germany. Similarly, in the nearby Italy, where we have during the World War II, Benito Mussolini, who came to power, who was also driven by the idea of extreme nationalism, and later on he has this agreement with the Adolf Hitler. So after that, for the first time after Mussolini, a right-wing government under the leadership of new president has come into power. Similarly, we talk about Hungary. We have a nationalist government or extreme nationalist government run by Viktor Orban. In Poland also we have the nationalist government which has made a lot of aggressive policies, especially related to the women. And also in Turkey, if we talk about under the presidency of current president of Turkey, Erdogan, Turkey is kind of seen to be diverting or going back from its secular values to more Islamic values, more Islamic principles. Same thing we can see in the countries such as China, where Xi Jinping has been given the third term continuously. That is a historical win for him. In Philippines and also Brazil under the Bolsonaro. However, recently Bolsonaro has been defeated, and again now far left party under the leadership of current president Lula has come into power. But overall, if we talk about the current trend that we see, is that there is a rise of nationalism in some countries, it to a smaller extent, while in some countries it is to a much larger extent. So this is something that we are seeing happening around the world. The major reason why political philosophers, political scientists believe this is happening is because the liberal democratic order, whatever they have promised for the citizens, whatever they have promised to the people, they have largely failed to do so. And that is why there is a growing sense of discontentment among the population, not only in one country, but across all the countries of the world. And that is why we have resurgence of nationalism. Now, when we talk about nationalism, it is not something about the protection of nation's interest in the political term or geographical term, but there is one way how nationalism manifests itself also is in the economic terms. So economic nationalism basically refers to bringing and development of such set of policies and practices which are designed to create, grow, and most of all protect national economies in the context of the world market. In simple language, we can say that economic nationalism focuses more upon the principles and the idea of protectionism against the idea of globalization. And the reason why economic nationalism rises is because many times it is based on the unfounded belief that people, if they are coming from different countries, if there is a large scale immigration that is happening to certain countries, these people can work at a low cost, can work as cheap labor, and thus they are able to steal jobs from the domestic workers. Economic nationalists thus oppose immigration as well. And the best example of this you can see that during the Trump presidency, Trump decided that he will build and erect a wall along the US-Mexico border because large number of migrants are coming from the Mexico who American voters believe that they are coming here, stealing their jobs, and also increasing the rate of crime in USA. So this is how the manifestation of the bad concept or wrong concept of economic nationalism can be observed. Now, coming to the most important point is we have two terms, nationalism and patriotism. Most of the time, it seems that both refer to the same ideology, both refers to the same sense and feeling, but there is a strong or big differences among these two. So let us try to understand what are these differences. So if you compare, first of all, nationalism, I told you that nationalism basically refers to a sense of superiority among all the population or among the people who feel nationalist toward their own particular nation. And thus, if there is a sense of superiority, they believe that it is right for them to suppress, oppress other countries or suppress, oppress other regions which are relatively less developed than them or are weaker than them. On the other hand, if you talk about patriotism, it is referring to the pride one have toward one's own country and also have a strong willingness to defend if some threat, external threat comes toward the country. So what we can understand, nationalism can even justify the aggression and even operation of the other countries, other regions, while patriotism basically is a defensive approach that only comes into existence, or we can say people only take aggressive posture if one's country is attacked. So this is the first difference. So nationalism basically give rise to arrogance and potential military aggression. On the other hand, patriotism has a kind of a positive value. The third difference we can understand is that concept of nationalism has been used to justify imperialism, new imperialism, and colonization in the past. On the other hand, patriotism help nation traverse the troubled water, the troubled waters that basically we see due to the increasing effect of globalization. So basically, if you look at this particular diagram, what we can say in simple sense, again, we can understand a difference by looking at this example that patriotism, a person can say that I am going to work on my house because it is the best house. While on the other hand, a nationalist can say that my house is best house. Why? Because there is no other reason, because it is my house, that is why it is the best house. So this kind of difference in ideology is what makes nationalism different from the patriotism. Now, obviously, as we know that in the modern time, we are seeing resurgence of nationalism. So there are a lot of concerns that why the nationalism is rising and how can it affect the people, society, and the global order in general. So first concern we have is that as nationalist tendency rises among any country, we know that their stances again of anti-immigration and exclusionary brand of nationalism can cause a division in a country which is diverse in various ways. A country which is diverse in linguistic terms, diverse in ethnic terms, diverse in religious terms, there generally if nationalism or the sentiment of nationalism arises, it can create a fissure and fission that can cause internal troubles among the various sections of the population. For example, we saw this same during the Trump presidency. We have the movement Black Lives Matter, where the African American people started to believe that their life is threatened, their life is endangered, and they do not feel the sense of equality as at par with their what we can say is a white population. So that is something that we can see if there is a rise of nationalism. Second, we can say that nationalism also give rise to prolonged period of isolationism that also affect the economic growth and development of a country. Not only that, even many times due to the principles of isolationism, there is a less tendency is very less, or we can say there is less effort from the from the countries to ensure that whatever ideology, whatever concept their country is based upon, it has to be protected at all costs, not only within their territorial boundary but across all of the world. So that is something that also give rise to more aggressive stance by dictatorial regimes. For example, for a long period of time, United States had followed the policy of isolationism. And when they follow the policy of isolationism, they did not intervene in the World War II. It is only when the Japan directly attacked the Pearl Harbor of USA has no other option but to jump in the Second World War. So that is something that is a huge risk associated with following the principles of isolationism that is driven largely by the concept of nationalism. Thus, in large sense, what we can say, it also creates a competitive environment, and this competitive environment is not healthy environment, but it is a bad environment, because the nationalism feeling, extreme nationalism feeling, creates a sense of us versus them attitude, or love it or leave it attitude among the people. So this is the concerns that are associated with the resurgence of nationalism in the modern times. Thus, what we can say in conclusion is that a nationalist is one who thinks solely or mainly in terms of competitive prestige. His thought always turns on facts and concepts such as victories, defeats, triumphs, and humiliation. This is something that has been remarkably said by George Orwell, who is well known as the author of book 1984. And thus, nationalism can also contribute to domestic division and unrest, and also can cause fission, and chaotic or chaos around the world between different countries. So that is all about the concept of nationalism. I hope you understood the major points regarding this particular concept. That is all for this particular video. Thank you very much. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more helpful content.